They were not sent to save us. They were sent to watch, to record, to witness humanity's stumbling crawl from ignorance without intervention. The Watchers, 200 angels stationed at the edge of paradise, tasked with a single commandment. Do not touch the clay. But immortality breeds curiosity. And curiosity, in beings who have never known consequence, becomes obsession. This was the age before sin had a name, before floods were prophesied, before the word forbidden was carved into stone. The earth was young, wild, unmarked by the weight of divine law, and the Watchers grew bored. They watched humans coupling in firelight, watched them birth and bleed and age and rot. They witnessed the daughters of men dancing beneath stars, their skin flushed with life, their laughter echoing through valleys untouched by dread. And something shifted in the perfect minds of heaven's sentinels. Not love, not even lust, not at first. Envy. They envied the brevity, the urgency, the way mortality made every moment burn. Angels, eternal and unchanging, knew nothing of desperation, nothing of the intoxicating terror that comes from knowing you will end. So, they asked themselves a question no angel had ever dared ask. What if we could taste it? Not death. That was impossible. But flesh. They did not fall from grace. They walked away from it. Samyasa went first, not in shame, but in defiance. He stood at the precipice between realms and turned to the others with a proposition. If we are to transgress, let us transgress together. Let no single angel bear the weight of God's wrath alone. One by one, they swore the oath, 200 angels, bound not by obedience, but by conspiracy. They descended on Mount Hermon, their wings cutting through the sky like falling stars. The air itself recoiled. When their feet touched soil, the ground cracked beneath them. Animals fled in every direction. The trees bent away, as though creation itself recognized the wrongness of their presence. But the daughters of men did not flee. How could they? To behold an angel is to lose the capacity for choice. Their beauty was not aesthetic, it was ontological, a gravitational pull that rewired the mind. When Azazel whispered his name to a shepherd's daughter, she forgot her own. When Barakiel touched the hand of a weaver, her pulse synchronized with the rhythm of the cosmos. The Watchers did not seduce, they eclipsed, and the women, mortal and small, became vessels for something their bodies were never designed to contain. What the Watchers did not tell them, they were not the first. Heaven had run this experiment before. In ages so distant, they existed only as scars in the fabric of time. And those experiments had been unmade so thoroughly that even memory of them was forbidden. But the Watchers remembered, and they chose to repeat history anyway. Feathers began to fall from their wings, not slowly, but in clumps. White became ash-gray, then black, then oily and wrong. Their halos dimmed. Their voices, once resonant with divine authority, grew hoarse. They told themselves this was evolution. Heaven called it corruption. The truth was somewhere worse. The women screamed for 9 months straight, not in labor, during gestation. Their bellies distended beyond the architecture of human biology. Bones fractured under the pressure of growth that should not exist. Skin stretched translucent, revealing shapes moving within, limbs too long, skulls too wide, fingers that pressed against the womb like prisoners testing the walls of their cell. Some women went mad before the birth. They clawed at their own flesh, begging for release. Others fell into catatonic silence, their eyes fixed on some distant horror only they could see. The Watchers watched with fascination, not remorse. They recorded every detail, measured every scream. When their wives died in childbirth, and many did, the angels studied the bodies with clinical detachment, seeking to understand what had gone wrong, seeking to improve the process for the next generation. This was not love, this was experimentation. And when the Nephilim finally tore their way into the world, the earth itself shuddered. They did not cry, they spoke. Newborns who emerged with knowledge already burning in their eyes. Infants who grew a foot per day, whose teeth came in sharp and hungry, whose first words were not mother, but commands. The Nephilim looked upon their mortal parents and felt nothing. They looked upon the earth and felt ownership. And they looked upon humanity with the same detachment their fathers had, as resources to be consumed. There is no record of how tall the first Nephilim grew. 15 feet, 20, 30. Some accounts, now burned or buried, spoke of giants who stood as tall as cedars, whose eyes were level with the roofs of temples, whose hands could palm a human skull like a fruit. But the true horror was not their size, it was their intelligence. The Nephilim remembered their fathers, not as children remember parents, but as if they had been their fathers. The knowledge of angels lived in their neurons, forbidden sciences, the architecture of matter, the true names of things. They understood metallurgy without instruction, astronomy without observation, warfare without training. They were born generals, born kings, born gods, and they were ravenous. A Nephilim child ate its weight in meat daily. Adolescents consumed entire herds. Adults needed more than food. They needed stimulation, challenges, conquests. They hunted, not for survival, but for the thrill of dominance. Humans were plentiful. Humans were weak. Humans screamed beautifully when broken. The Nephilim learned this early. They began with animals, tearing apart wolves and bears with their bare hands. But animals stopped fleeing after the first kill. The challenge faded, so they turned to humans. And humans never stopped running, never stopped begging. That made it interesting. Villages learned to go silent when a Nephilim shadow fell across their valley. Mothers smothered their crying infants rather than draw attention. Men castrated themselves, believing it might spare them from being chosen for the giants' experiments. It did not. The Nephilim kept journals, carved in stone, written in blood. They documented their hunts with the precision of scientists. Subject 1 survived 3 days without water while being pursued. Subject 2 begged for death after the removal of both legs. Subject 3 attempted to trade offspring for freedom. Offspring consumed first. They felt no guilt. They had been designed without it. Their fathers had seen to that. Civilization did not evolve. It was shaped. The Nephilim built empires upon pyramids of human bone. They erected monuments so massive they could be seen from the stars, not to honor God, but to mock heaven, with proof of what the Watchers had achieved. Cities rose overnight, constructed by slave labor that worked until hands bled and spines snapped. Aqueducts carried not just water, but blood, channeled from mass sacrifices performed to feed the giants' insatiable hunger for spectacle. The knowledge of the Watchers spread like disease. Humans learned to forge weapons from metals that should not exist. They learned words that could bend reality, incantations that required human sacrifice to power. They learned to crossbreed animals in ways that produce things, creatures, neither one species nor another, living in agony, useful only as weapons or warnings. Bloodlines were intentionally corrupted. The Nephilim took wives, dozens, hundreds, and bred them systematically, attempting to create a race that would replace humanity entirely. Children born from these unions were often monstrous: 6 fingers, too many eyes, vestigial wings that could not fly, bones growing outside their skin. Most died within hours. The ones who survived were worse. The soil rejected the blood of the Nephilim. Where it spilled, nothing grew for generations. Rivers that carried their waste turned black and lifeless. The sky grew darker, as though creation itself was closing its eyes, unwilling to witness what the earth had become. God did not intervene, not yet. And the watchers, seeing this, began to believe they had won. That perhaps God was not watching after all. That perhaps they had finally surpassed their Creator. This belief lasted 3 more years. The rain began at midnight, not as droplets, but as a wall, a vertical ocean falling from a sky that split open like a wound. The deep places of the earth cracked simultaneously, releasing torrents that had been held back since creation's first day. The Nephilim realized what was happening immediately. They did not panic. They adapted. The strongest climbed mountains, dragging humans with them as food supplies. Others built boats, massive, grotesque arks made of bone and wood, crewed by enslaved humans rowing until their hearts gave out. Some attempted to kill God himself, hurling spears at the sky, screaming challenges into the storm. The water swallowed them all, but not quickly. The Nephilim were strong enough to swim for days, strong enough to cling to wreckage, to floating corpses, to each other. They watched the world disappear beneath the surface, their cities, their monuments, their kingdoms, and they understood, perhaps for the first time, what it meant to be mortal, to be erasable. Their final hours were spent in rage, then in bargaining, then in something that almost resembled prayer. The water gave no answer. When it was over, their bones sank into mud that would harden into stone, buried so deep that even their memory would become fossil. The Watchers faced worse. Archangels descended, not in mercy, but in execution. Chains forged from the fabric of reality itself bound the fallen angels in places that exist outside geography. Not hell, not heaven. Elsewhere. Pits where time moves differently, where a second lasts eons, where consciousness remains intact but the body atrophies into something unrecognizable. They are still there, and according to some texts, they are still aware, still waiting for a judgment that may never come, or worse, one that already has and will simply repeat forever. God did not explain. God did not justify. The flood ended. The waters receded. Humanity crawled from the wreckage, 8 souls who would carry the species forward. But they carried something else too, genetic memory, dreams of giants, a persistent, gnawing fear of deep water and dark skies, and the sense that something is watching from just beyond the veil. The Nephilim were erased, but the knowledge of them remains, encrypted in human DNA, surfacing in myth and nightmare. They find the bones sometimes, femurs the size of tree trunks, buried in sediment layers that shouldn't exist, skulls with cranial capacities 3 times human norm, teeth that belong to no known species. Museums hide them, governments deny them. Scientists explain them away as hoaxes, aberrations, misidentifications. But there are too many, in too many places, all dated to the same narrow window of history, a window that ended abruptly, violently, comprehensively. The Watchers still whisper from their chains, not to everyone, only to those who listen in the right way, in dreams, in moments of weakness. They offer the same thing they offered humanity before: knowledge, power, evolution. Some accept, and the blood, diluted but indelible, stirs once more. Because the truth they don't write in any scripture is this: the Nephilim were not destroyed, they were interrupted. And interruptions, given enough time, always resume.